Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for 5 key success factors for fast retail delivery. Today's event is presented by Pivotree and Fluent Commerce. Before we launch into our main presentation, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, today's event will be about an hour long, and we will be recording it. We will email you a link to the archive recording so you can view the presentation again later if you'd like, or share it with a colleague. Please disable your pop-up blockers to ensure you have no trouble viewing our slides in today's event. This is an interactive event, so feel free to submit questions to our speakers using the chat box on your screen. Please know we do capture all questions. We also encourage you to tweet throughout the event using the handle @TeamPivotree. If you would like to enlarge your slides, you may do so by dragging the corner of the box. This function allows you to make them larger or smaller. All widgets are also resizable. Please take a moment to visit our Resource Center. The box is on your console. You can access a number of resources that you may find helpful. If you're having any technical difficulties during the webinar that I haven't already covered, please first clear your cache, refresh your link, and then your console will refresh. If that doesn't work, please reach out for our Q&A box. I just want to say welcome. I'm Susan Rush. I'm the Director of Content at SmartBrief, and I will be your moderator today. Today, we will be discussing with Pivotree and Fluent Commerce the 5 key success factors for fast retail delivery, and we'll be exploring why inventory accuracy and positioning matter, drop shipping and the importance of SLAs, store fulfillment, and staff engagement. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers to you today. We have 2. First, we have Jim Brochu, Vice President, Operations, Pivotree Supply Chain. Jim is a career supply chain professional. He has experience architecting and leading complex, high-impact enterprise supply chain, IT, and business projects designed to give immediate value to clients. Jim has a strong pedigree of successful implementations for complex retail and B2B solutions. Prior to co-founding Bridge Solutions Group, a Pivotree company, Jim helped grow the supply chain consulting groups as marketing leader and applications architect for 2 other boutique supply chain IT firms. Jim graduated with a master's degree in supply chain from Rutgers. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Susan. Good to be here.
We also have with us Chad Hooker, Vice President, Global Channel and Alliances, Fluent Commerce. Chad is a digital commerce and OMS expert with more than 18 years experience in sales and delivery of enterprise software. He was previously Director of Alliances for the Americas at Elastic Path, a pioneer and leader in headless commerce. Prior to his role at Elastic Path, Chad was the Vice President of Worldwide Commerce Solutions at Lightwell Inc., a specialist in order management and supply chain management, where he led a global team serving B2C, B2B, and global clients worldwide. Let me tell you a little bit about Pivotree. Pivotree specializes in end-to-end products and solutions to design, build, and manage complex commerce ecosystems for 250 leading global brands, streamlining the buying and fulfillment journey and building trust at every touch point. Pivotree empowers frictionless commerce experiences from start to finish. Fluent Commerce is a leading provider of cloud-native distributed order management system, Fluent Order Management. Fluent Order Management helps organizations solve the biggest challenges in retail: inventory availability, order orchestration across all your stock locations, and store fulfillment optimization. Fluent Commerce enables retailers to adapt and evolve, changing the status quo and empowering premium customer experience. Before we turn it over to our speakers today for their discussion, first we'd like to take an audience poll. Here's your first question. Are you confident you have an accurate view of your inventory? Your selections are high, medium, or low. Chad, do you have a guess what's going to be most popular? Or?
I'm guessing will be low to medium, but we'll see.
What about you, Jim? Are you feeling the same way?
Yeah, I mean, I hope it's high, but generally speaking, based on experience, it's not going to be high for everybody. But I'm very interested in the outcome here.
Okay, great. Well, let's see what happened. So we landed right there in the middle. Very interesting results. Jim, let's turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. So I think that's actually a perfect lead-in with about 87% of our respondents somewhere between medium and low. Perfect way for us to get into the topic of inventory accuracy. So we want to talk to you for a minute about the impacts of uncertainty in supply chain and how that drives some of the discussions and systems we're going to talk about today. So historically in supply chain, you could almost envision 4 main priorities or strategies for inventory management. Some situations required minimizing risk, some focused on responsiveness, some focused on efficiency. And most retail organizations in the lead up to 2019, where a lot of things changed, we're trending toward lower inventory carrying and processing costs, and we're trending toward that bottom left in this diagram today. And the reason for that was pretty straightforward. Supply lines, both international and domestic, were fairly stable and supported just-in-time or last-minute inventory, so they could focus on margin optimization and speed to get things out the door and to their customers, because their primary concern was competing with the likes of Amazon. But in a lot of ways, since 2019, the elephant in the room has really changed. So as we look at the elephant in the room, sorry, our speaker's notes are not updating correctly. As we look at the elephant in the room, we're seeing a story that's changing. In 2019, there were massive disruptions in the supply chain, and it led to huge disruptions in service levels for customers. As you can see, over a third of businesses admit to selling inventory that they didn't have. More than $1 trillion was the value of stockouts due to COVID disruptions in the supply chain, and the retail supply chain accuracy changed significantly and trended downward because people just didn't have visibility and they couldn't understand where their things were at the time that they needed to understand it. So I think this drove a lot of very important questions, including what do I really have available in my network that's available to sell? And that all starts with inventory visibility. Questions like, what do I have inbound on my purchase orders and when can I plan to sell it? What inventory is in our outbuildings and our satellite locations? How do I prevent becoming one of the 1/3 of people in that sold inventory that we didn't have? All of those are questions that are there that all stem back from inventory visibility, and that's really driving a revised strategy and a revised way of looking at our inventory networks. Retailers are focused more on the need to balance various strategies as opposed to focusing on that bottom left idea. While we still need to protect our margin with a core of efficient, optimized warehouse processes, the trend is becoming more and more that they need options and dynamic capabilities to leverage the tools within their network. So, for instance, a lot of retailers, while they are still shipping from their warehouses to fulfill their e-commerce volume, are also looking at how can I leverage my store network? How can I leverage my dropshipper network? How can I essentially leverage my micro fulfillment locations to deploy inventory? And the reason for that is simple. Demand uncertainty and inventory uncertainty is increasing, and the need to be responsive and agile with your supply network is changing along with it. Along with that, some retailers are even exploring carrying extra stock and extra inventory as they move forward. And the reason for that is simple as well. They're uncertain about their supply lines. We don't know when the next Suez Canal is going to be blocked by a giant ship. So that risk mitigation is taking hold. But to be able to execute on that, what they need is visibility into their inventory, and visibility into not just inventory across the board, but inventory down to the location and capability level. So the first few steps in inventory excellence to get on that path almost always tend to be the same. It's looking at the gaps in your inventory accuracy, the processes that you need to add to drive accuracy, and identifying a mechanism for ensuring and distributing that information.
Yeah, exactly, James. I think, one of the, as you mentioned, one of the key lessons learned over the last few years is that the equilibrium that we had of supply and demand is not constant, and was not guaranteed. Naturally, we used to see seasonality in the supply and demand across all industries, but nothing like what we've experienced since 2019. The norms of supply and demand were just completely gone there for a bit, with labor shortages, disruption in supply, panic buying. Retailers and brands realized that the rigidity of their tech and process that they had historically maybe just lived with was now killing the business. Without the ability to pivot and pivot rapidly, they had inventory that was orphaned out there in the network with no visibility, as you mentioned, into that amount or the conditions of those items. They also lacked the ability to pivot and change the process to be able to go after and use that inventory that was out there. We continue to hear this from retailers around, that the lack of the real-time or near real-time global visibility is a top challenge and a top initiative. And what we've seen is that the retailers and brands really need to be able to have levers that they can pull quickly to increase their agility and to provide really novel fulfillment and delivery options to customers at a moment's notice. But as you're looking at the network, there's not all fulfillment locations are equal. They're geographically disparate. Many have different capabilities to ship, and in many cases, the underlying efficiency and accuracy that most relied on in their D2C warehouses are just not deployed or applicable in some of those other fulfillment locations. That's why, as you just mentioned, the first few steps in inventory excellence tend to be the same. Identify those blind spots, then identify the process you need to drive the accuracy and the tech to make that happen, then identify a mechanism for ensuring the distribution of that information out to the different selling channels. When multiple fulfillment types and locations are used, most often the inventory that's out there is individually controlled and siloed, and as a result, it's impossible to get a really true picture of availability when a customer is looking to buy multiple items, say from different locations, and that complexity and inventory blind spots increase as the number and types of locations are utilized. The result is typically overpromising and have to cancel orders or false stockouts, resulting in lost sales. In either case, customer expectations are naturally not met, and the integrity of the brand is compromised. What we saw back whenever digital was just a channel was something similar to this, that maybe an ERP or maybe one of the legacy monolith OMSs was kind of playing the glue, because at the time the idea maybe was, well, the ERP was not purpose built for being an order management system. It did have OMS capabilities, and it's maybe good enough. But this was working well basically until it wasn't. By the time that retailers had realized the need for change, it was almost too late, and stores were locked up. Labor shortages hit, and it caused disruptions throughout the supply chain. What we've seen is that since then, when digital became the only channel, the ERPs and the legacy, say, monolith OMSs were just getting crushed. They couldn't keep up with the needs and the chattiness from the orders that were coming in, but they also couldn't pivot quickly to be able to embrace and utilize new means of fulfilling orders. One good example is a customer of ours was JD Sports. They'd embraced Fluent as part of their modernization of their tech stack pre-pandemic. And historically, they had only shipped through their DCs. Naturally, whenever the stores became locked up and inventory was stuck, they needed to pivot quick. And with just some configuration changes in Fluent and some business process overhaul, they were able to pivot from DC fulfillment to store fulfillment in a matter of 5 days.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Chad. So visibility is the first tool set that we get when we move to a robust platform like a modern order management. And moving to that type of robust platform is the first hurdle that we want to overcome if we want to unlock the value of the inventory network. But there's a broader discussion to be had, because getting that visibility simply puts us on the road to deploying and leveraging that inventory better to support our customers' needs. And when our inventory picture gets more accurate, we can really just begin looking at those objectives, right? We can start to consider why we're overselling, why we're underselling inventory. Is it a visibility issue? Is it a business process issue? Or is it something in between? We can start to ask really interesting questions when we have that visibility, like, should we modify our merchandising and our inventory strategies to optimize our product recommendations for our customers with confidence, both internally and confidence that our customers are going to get what they want. And once we have the visibility and the inventory tools in place, we can more rapidly adjust our strategies and optimize our sourcing and decision-making engines, like Fluent Order Management, these more robust platforms. And instead of asking, what is my inventory, which is a very simple question that a lot of people don't have the answer to, as we saw earlier in the poll, we can really begin asking the question, what is the right inventory for me to use in each of the situations that my brands and my customers are facing? So as we start having the tools for visibility, we want to start thinking about other things, like how do we want to position our inventory as we move forward? At Pivotry, the lens that we apply to many of those supply chain questions is one of fulfillment experience, right? Everyone talks about customer experience, that front-end experience that the customer gets when they're interacting with your brand. We believe that the brand experience and the fulfillment experience extends into the physical world and is as important as the upfront digital experience to what the customer's overall experience with your brand is. It almost always crosses into the real world, and we focus on enabling the physical delivery of goods, which, if done well, is simple metrics that customers have come to expect, right? It's on-time packages delivered where the customer wants them. It's clarity throughout their entire fulfillment process. But when it's fragmented or broken down, their orders can be late, they don't arrive, or they're incorrect. And this drives both a bad customer experience, but also a snowball of delivery costs, of refund and appeasement costs for brands that are obviously best avoided. Conversations with our Pivotry customers have identified that for many of their customers, a single delivery exception, especially if they're new to the brand, can be enough to prevent them from ever buying from that brand again. And that's why we focus this message of fulfillment excellence and experience on our customer experience.
Exactly. And so, as you're increasing and expanding that assortment to different and new selling channels, having the ability to segment and create views of that inventory is really key in how that gets exposed. We look at the way that you can look at what and where you sell, and we can map that to the overall customer experience you want to provide through that channel. Naturally, customer expectations change frequently, and obviously many factors impact the profitability of the order, but having a highly connected system that's optimized in operations is the role of the OMS. Being able to dynamically adjust how inventory is presented across channels, taking into context the customer context as well as the business objectives, is the role of the OMS, and inventory segmentation is a good way to optimize that. By segmenting out what and how is being sold in each marketplace or region, once you have that segmentation, you can drill down even further and employ unique buffers and exclusions for each one of those channels, marketplaces, or regions. And for example, some regions may have restrictions on items with high alcohol content, or maybe you want to prevent fragile items from being shipped from one location to another. All this allows you to tailor how your inventory is utilized, and also how the customer experience in each one of these channels or marketplaces is achieved. The way that we do that inside Fluent is through the use of a virtual catalog. And so the way this works is the virtual catalog basically takes input from two sources. One is the actual inventory catalog, which provides the inventory position updates, and the second is what we call a control group. And that control group provides those buffers and exclusions that I had mentioned earlier. And the data from those two sources is processed and pulled together into a workflow, which then in turn calculates and updates what is exposed to the shopper. The critical part is this provides your e-commerce site, or whatever the selling channel is, with an accurate picture of inventory that's available sell, tuned to the experience that you want to provide, which prevents you from overselling, underselling, and
Oh, did we lose Chad? Is that just me? All right. Seems like we lost Chad. I'm going to take over. I know where he was going with that, but essentially, those tools allow you to prevent from overselling and underselling. And what I really liked a couple slides ago was how the newer systems allow you to segment not just by region, but to sub-segment your inventory and target it toward individual locations. I think this is really the foundation of the question, what is my optimal inventory positioning, right? So once we have inventory visibility solved for, we know where it is. Now the next question is, how can I slice and dice my inventory to take a look at some of my key objectives as a brand? If I'm focused on reducing my inventory carrying costs, right, then I can slice and dice my inventory view to have as little inventory in a given location as possible. If my focus is just getting extended range and availability for a subset of customers, then I can segment that inventory for that subset of customers and make sure that it's available when they need it, and that I have the ability to ship to the various locations within my fulfillment network. And that extends across all the various types of locations, right? It's my primary fulfillment centers, it's my satellite fulfillment centers, it's my stores, it's my dropship locations, it's my entire fulfillment network. That once I have that granular level of control for my inventory and I can see where it is in real time, then essentially the sky's the limit, and the questions really start to change. Not what do I have, but where should I deploy this? How do we get this out to this segment of customers in the most profitable, optimal way possible? So it's really a great thing. And once we have those two tools in place, that's the foundation to getting to the fun part, delivering to your customers, right? So this really leads you to be able to unlock more flexible fulfillment options that will support your retail strategy as it changes and when it changes. So we're getting into the subject of flexible fulfillment, right? How do we want to look at our assets throughout our supply network and optimally deploy them? Before we dive into that, we did want to jump into another poll question. So Sarah, if we could get into that poll, that would be awesome. Okay, I guess I'll introduce it. So the question for our retailers.
Sorry, I got it. Sorry. So the question is, do you offer, and you can select all that apply, curbside pickup, buy online, pick up in store, buy online, return in store, other, or none of the above? Jim, do you think there's something that's going to bubble to the top, or is it going to be across the board?
Yeah, no, I'm really interested to see specifically the overlap in these options. Many retailers have one or two of these, but I'm very interested to see how many retailers have really reached that advanced level of maturity where if a customer wants to pick it up curbside, they can. If they want to buy it online and just go into the store and actually physically pick it up, they can. And I think the flexibility to return in store and flexible return options is one that's really been prominent for us at Pivotry in conversations that we're having almost daily with our customers, because when we're in the return cycle, generally it's either because the customer is doing something like bracket buying and it's just a part of the brand strategy to say, let them order 3 things and we return 2 of them, or it's related to a bad experience for the customer. And the goal is to minimize those pain points. Either way, having additional return options, including returning to store, seems to be a really pivotal thing for our customers right now.
Okay, great. Let's see what the audience said. Yeah, pretty interesting results. Chad, let me turn it over to you.
Yeah, very interesting. I was excited to see how many of those have been curbside. It'd be interesting though if how that's looking now, and also what the journey looked like to get there, because what we've seen is oftentimes folks start from the ship from the DC and then it's ship from store, because it's a bit easier to be able to promise a ship from store type scenario versus a pickup, and then obviously going one level deeper, being able to provide curbside and be able to provide an exact amount of time to be able to promise to have that customer show up. So really interesting results here. And so, while sometimes, we talk about the inventory and the different types of fulfillment, sometimes, we hear in the idea of split shipments carries a bit of a negative connotation. But, the way that we look at it is it always comes down to optimizing either the fastest over the cheapest or the cheapest over the fastest. It's just that balance of customer expectations and operational efficiency, because naturally, you could have a extremely customer-friendly processes and systems in place, but that wouldn't be necessarily profitable or be able to maintain that profitability. The way that we look at that was, with a modern OMS like Fluent, you're able to visually create rules that help instruct the OMS or instruct Fluent on how to behave in certain contexts. In terms of the inventory positions, the order, the transit time, and even maybe even the loyalty status of the customer. Just one really simple example to kind of talk through to just see this in action is, let's assume that a customer's shopping and they created an order and it's sending off for fulfillment. And so if all those items are available in a DC, then great, we can have Fluent just send all the orders to fulfill from there. If not, are all of those available in one store? If so, obviously we could then send the order to be fulfilled from that store. It gets a bit more complicated when they're not. Maybe one of those items that available in the cart was available in the DC. Then we would split that across maybe different stores and DCs. Or if all of those are available in different stores, maybe we'd end up splitting those across the different stores. And we do that under the covers with some sourcing logic, and all of these are different rules, like I mentioned, that you can tune that are in our workflow engine that you create to align with the business processes that you're looking for. And so let's say that the items are just closest to the customer, we can use that as just a mechanism of location of the store and zip code of the customer, just ship those out. Maybe you want to look at nodes, either stores or DCs that have the most inventory, or maybe the lowest sell-through or the oldest inventory, and be able to optimize on that to look at reducing stockouts, or maybe being able to make sure that you reduce the number of markdowns, or maybe looking at actually the performance of a given node and looking at maybe, say, the lowest number of open orders at any given time to ensure a faster turnaround, or maybe looking at actually the history of that specific store or DC on their ability to turn those orders around, such that you get an order late in the day that you're wanting to make sure that those orders are fulfilled that day. We could have Fluent look at the fulfillment rates on those, so that we would pick the right store that we knew could be able to deliver in that day, or maybe just simply look at a node that has the least orders fulfilled in that day, so that we know that there's capacity and be able to spread the love there and distribute across those different rules. And as I mentioned, these are just a subset of the rules that you can create within Fluent, and it's not one or all. It's a mixture of those, and it's a mixture of the priority across them.
Yeah, I mean, Chad, I think that's a really fantastic point and set of options, right? And tying it back to what we talked about earlier, legacy ERP solutions, even some of the more monolithic order management solutions, might have had one or a couple of these tools. They might have had visibility into part of your inventory, but maybe not the ability to segment it as fully as some of the more modern solutions like Fluent do have. I think that, I think of it like a buffet of options almost, right? Where now there are just all these options. But the question really for retailers is, what are you hungry for? And what I mean by that is, what are the underlying business problems that all of these options solve, right? So for instance, if you're a brand that's really struggling to staff up your warehouse locations, then focusing on options that spread the load and the capacity to fulfill across your network, like the least orders fulfilled that day, really start to make sense. If you're a brand that is focused on speed of delivery, and you have a customer who's maybe a new customer, or they have a rush order, then what's the closest option to the customer? If you have a brand that is heavily marked down, or if you have a brand that is using time-sensitive items, right? So if I'm selling food or other items that go bad over time, then I really want to focus on making sure that the inventory, I'm not using the newest inventory for all my orders and leaving inventory on my shelves to rot and then not having inventory for my later orders. So I think that the question here comes down to, how do you want to look at flexible fulfillment, and what are the problems, the underlying problems that your business is solving? Gone are the days that we used to have where you would be solving one problem where you only had one or two levers to pull. Now there's this complex rule engine, or robust rule engine, that lets you focus on combining business priorities, optimization, and customer experience across the board, and doing it through a lens of inventory visibility across your entire supply network. And realistically, that's a game changer. But the interesting thing is that level of flexibility does come with its own set of discrete challenges. Instead of focusing on your customer experience across one back-end system or one mode of fulfillment, the underlying business processes tend to get spread out more and more, and your customer experience is hinged on a more spread out fulfillment network, right? So when we look at your staff experience in your store, for instance, we want to talk about store fulfillment as one of those tools in that tool set that we're looking at. Store fulfillment really should be an asset for your organization, but if you don't have the right tools and ability to manage it, provide visibility, the underlying business processes and understanding of how it's being deployed, then it can really be a burden. It can add cost. Generally in stores, especially if you have high seasonality, your employees don't have the longest tenure, right? So high turnover means lower levels of average training and other things. So the tools themselves need to be intuitive and available to them, and on more modern platforms, because a lot of the people who are working in retail, they're online shopping, they're doing things themselves, they're familiar with the brand experience, and there's no reason that they have to be speaking an entirely different language than digital native apps that make the user experience easy. So one of the key things that we want to focus on for novel fulfillment options like store is, how do we make it a better experience for store associates, right? The platform itself needs to be intuitive. It needs to have rapid onboarding. It needs to be simple enough for seasonal workers to be able to use it, but it needs to have the robust options to support all of the use cases in it, right? So user-driven capabilities, role-driven capabilities, all of that is becoming non-optional, especially as we push more and more of our fulfillment to these satellite locations. So the takeaway from this really is, as brands expand their reach across the entire network, we don't want to let our tech drag our associates down, right? Because the end result of a good store experience is the customer gets what they want. You've used an idle asset or an underutilized asset in your fulfillment network, and ultimately you've gotten your inventory in the hands of someone who's going to go enjoy it and use it. So the goal of these is really meeting the customer's expectations and promises, and technology like Fluent's store capability really helps that out. And I think the other thing to consider as well is these locations tend to be smaller. They tend to have lighter staff than your warehouses. So you need a solution that can balance the load across that network and use those resources efficiently. I've seen time and time again retailers that are new to store fulfillment, both pick up in store, ship from store, and all those things, sending volume to a store that just frankly couldn't handle it, and they didn't have the tools or the business processes to understand that. So we love to come into those situations and quickly put them on a modern platform and deploy the processes that let them keep an eye on their associates, how their associates are meeting their customers' needs, and really optimize that overall experience. Now, when we talk about the tools that are in our network for expanded fulfillment, for flexible fulfillment, one that comes up quite often is drop shipping, right? Using a third party to actually ship your orders direct from their location to your customer without it ever entering your supply network directly, without you taking ownership of the goods. And I think that's a really important point, but not just for the inventory. When you outsource your fulfillment to a drop shipper, what you're doing is you're handing the keys to the car, which is your brand experience, over to a third party. And to do that, you need to have a high level of trust that they're going to meet your brand's experience, and you have to have the underlying business processes and visibility to be able to do that successfully. Now, I've broken drop shipping down probably a little bit too much, but when we look at it, it's 5 steps, right? The customer orders, your order management system decides that this order should be drop shipped based on criteria that you set. The drop shipper receives and prepares your order. They ship it to the customer, and your customer receives the order from the drop shipper. Simple, right? Well, with dropship, when you put that brand experience in someone else's hands and things go wrong, you need to know it quickly, you need to keep an eye on it, and you need to benchmark performance, right? Because these vendors have the same complexity in their supply chain that you do. So measuring the SLAs and mitigating the issues at all those levels, and there are hundreds of pain points that are possible within this 5-step process, is becoming just increasingly important for brands that want to protect their customers from bad experiences. So for instance, what happens if your vendor is out of stock when your customer orders, but you don't know it when you take the order? How quickly can your vendor acknowledge that they've received and are filling your order so that you know they actually received it? Another great question is, what happens if your dropshipper can't get a carrier to fulfill the order in time? With carrier shortages being massively top of mind across all of retail, all of these are questions that you really need to understand. And real-time inventory visibility, clear business processes, and a tool set to help you manage it, combined with clear service levels and agreements with your dropshippers, really are the keys and pillars to make a solid drop shipping program and enable that program to be successful in your ecosystem. Now, I'll be honest, guys, this slide was initially supposed to read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But when it actually messed this up, I didn't want to fix it. And the reason is all the bullet points are one for a reason. For some brands, the inventory accuracy score, KPI, is going to be the most important one in their quiver, right? If they're primarily concerned about just making sure we don't promise inventory to a customer. For others, on-time delivery, if their brand hinges on we get it to you on time every time, is going to be number one. The acknowledgement speed and accuracy. So if you have unreliable drop shippers, or if you just have the ability to send an order to multiple drop ship partners or to another location, understanding if your drop shipper is able to fulfill your order quickly means that you have the chance to salvage the order in the case that they can't acknowledge their ability to ship it. So there are hundreds of KPIs, but we've actually front-loaded the top 6 that if I were starting a drop shipping program, I would want to be measuring, monitoring, and have business processes and named people in my organization responsible for ensuring that these were at acceptable levels, and defining the processes for what happened when KPIs began to slip. So putting it all together, we've talked a lot today about platforms and visibility, but realistically, the overall discussion and decision point for us today is how do we bring together our selling channels, our inventory data throughout our entire supply network, and our ability to fulfill from the various locations that are available to us into a cohesive visibility and execution foundation to drive great user experiences on our platforms. We've talked about a number of trends, including inventory accuracy and the various ways that we slice and dice that and how that's shifting over time. We've talked about how do we strategically position our inventory throughout our network to take advantage of assets, both the efficient assets, the idle assets, and being dynamic. And we've talked a little bit about some locations that we can leverage in drop shipping and store fulfillment as tools to execute on that vision. But ultimately, it really comes together with a combination of robust systems that are capable of reacting and pivoting to your business's changing needs. It comes down to business processes that are modeled expertly to fit both with the capabilities of your system and the capabilities of your supply network, and that are driven by the underlying data, right? Not just the inventory data, but the item data, the historical KPIs and fulfillment data that all are fantastic assets for our brands. And that's why we really love working with our customers and with partners like Fluent, because we're increasingly having the tools to make this a seamless experience and to leverage those assets within our organization. So Chad, anything you'd like to add?
No, yeah, this is hopefully we've been able to provide some insight into what we've seen collectively and the tools required to deliver frictionless experiences. As you mentioned, and as what we see in the poll, right? It's most often a journey, and that journey is built on a foundation of good tech, process, and partners. And so it takes those three to always meet the ever evolving expectations of the customer. And we're extremely proud and thankful of the partnership that we have with Pivotry, and that makes sessions like today possible. So really appreciate everybody's time, and thank you for joining us.
That was a really great discussion. Thank you so much, Jim and Chad, for sharing those 5 key success factors for fast retail delivery. It's really important for today's environment. Fast retail delivery also means having the right distribution models. With so many options, Pivotry and Fluent are here to help. They've dove into the top 7 retail distribution models in their ebook, which you can download now by going to go.fluentcommerce.com/top7. We have some time for some audience questions. If you are listening in and haven't had a chance to put your question in, please do so. But for now, let's jump into some of the questions that we have received. Chad, this one's for you. What post-COVID new needs have you updated to your OMS, and any trends that we should know about or keep an eye out for?
Great question. Yeah, I'd say, the last couple of years that as we mentioned, we learned a lot of new things, operationally, technically, across the board. I think I'd say, just thinking through some of the things that's been released over that time, I think one thing that I would point to is we created what we call OMX, which is Order Management Experience. And basically, instead of us trying to kind of chase some of the needs that were coming in, we really took a step back and looked at what questions were being asked, and then how we could address those and say in a generic way, such that we give our customers the framework to be able to stitch together easily new experiences on top of Fluent, as well as the underlying plumbing behind the scenes to really make that rapid. Because as we learned and we talked about, the pivot and the rapid need of the pivots were coming, and we needed to make sure that we were enabling our customers and our clients to be able to have that framework and that foundation to be able to do that through the pandemic, as well as as even the world's evolving for us now, right? There's going to be unique needs that are coming, and it's just, for us, it's about really making sure that we're given that flexible foundation that our partners and our customers build off of.
Great, that was a great answer. Thanks for sharing. Jim, how does an order management system work with my other systems and platforms?
It helps if I'm not on mute, right? No, that's a great question. I think it's helpful for me to think of the order management system a little bit like the brain of the supply chain, right? At least from the fulfillment and execution side of things. And much like the brain, it really needs to be connected near real time to almost all of your key attributes that enable both selling and fulfillment. So generally speaking, they're established architectural patterns that you want to follow. You want to be pushing inventory and key information up to your selling channels. You want to be connected near real time to your entire fulfillment experience on the back end. And there's an entire network of systems and solutions that are required to do that. You want to be connected to your stores. You want to be connected to your warehouse solutions. You want to be connected to your entire ecosystem. And I would say order management is unique in that if you're deploying it across your entire supply chain capability, you're going to be touching almost every system from e-commerce front-end selling all the way down to the back-end financials and optimization. So it really is a combination of real-time and batch integrations that span the gamut of everything that your organization does, if I'm being honest, including master data, by the way. I tend to leave that for last, but you never want to forget about it, because getting good item and other data is critical to driving those experiences for your customers.
Yeah, and Jim, how do you get a large supplier communities to provide accurate, complete, and timely ASNs and item attribute data?
That's another great question. So I look at your supplier network, and I include the drop shippers that we talked about in that, but it's also your inbound suppliers and others. But especially with drop ship, I view it as similar to social media, right? Where it's important to achieve critical mass with your drop shipping network quite quickly. And once you've achieved that network effect, and you're connected to a bunch of suppliers that are capable of fulfilling orders for you, your assortment effectively becomes endless, and your reach as a supply chain gets larger and larger over time. So you can ship more inventory to more customers and drive more positive experiences throughout your whole brand. That's a difficult thing to do as an individual retailer. So I always want to bring into the discussion when we talk about that vendor network, right? There are aggregators or solutions that their entire purpose is integrating with marketplaces, with individual drop shippers. And I'll call out, Chad, if you wanted to add anything to this, but I'll call out that order management platforms, especially the more modern ones, make integrating into your dropship network and to your supplier network seamless, and integrating through those other third-party partners is a very, very rapid time to value to expand your capabilities quickly. Anything you want to add, Chad?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I think there's obviously a lot of process and a lot of SLAs and contracts that need to go into to make it operationally work. And then from a technical perspective, just making sure that you've got a foundation that's built on integration and in an open and say a flexible platform that's using modern technology in the way that the integrations are done, like GraphQL and webhooks and so forth. So I think it's a complex question for sure, and it takes a village to really get it right.
Great. I think, Jim, this one might be good for you as well, but Chad, feel free to weigh in. Do you have any clients that have integrated employee delivery for last mile on top of ship from store, BOPSIS, curbside?
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting question. And I think it extends the discussion of what we were talking about earlier, right? What are the assets that are in your inventory network? And one of the assets that tends not to get spoken about in your supply network is your employees and their ability to deliver last mile. I haven't had the opportunity to actually execute on an employee last mile delivery program yet, but it's definitely in the list of discussions that we're having at the strategic level with C-level and innovative companies. Both the ability to use employees for last mile. One of the more interesting ones is using novel locations. I have been involved in a project where we used train stations as the last mile delivery location. So a customer on their way into work can place an order, and when they came home from work and got off the train, they had lockers set up, and they could use those train stations as a kind of last mile self-service delivery option. So I think there are some really innovative discussions out there that are happening. I'll be honest, I think I'm very interested in which ones actually gain momentum, because I think it'll be a number of them, and I think it's becoming a more and more distributed model with options like delivering to your trunk or dropping things where you are as opposed to where you live. That's becoming a more and more robust discussion in the C-suite and in the strategy discussions that I'm having, and I'm very interested to see what ends up leading the pack.
Yeah, I think going back to what I mentioned about OMX, that's a perfect example of that. Is that being able to create an experience, because that employee-led delivery, right? You're going to need to be able to create an experience for that process to happen. You need the underlying APIs and business process to make that work, and to be able to talk back to the OMS and then relay that further back into the ecosystem of systems within a customer. I think that's exactly kind of the way and the trajectory that we were looking at OMX.
Chad, I have one from you. One of our attendees is asking, my problem is not managing the order. My problem is delivering and handling returns. How can this platform help me manage that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, returns are obviously nothing new, but the volume, the complexity of those returns, given when digital became the only channel, and being able to manage that through different, I'd say different processes, different channels on the way back. For us, we look at return orders. It's very similar to a sales order. It has a life cycle and it has a workflow, and then Fluent allows you for, say, an integration of customer returns made online, in stores, and then obviously through centralized dropship vendors as well as warehouse. You configure the workflow to return either to stock, return to vendor, or simply dispose based upon the needs of the specific situation. And all along the journey of that return, we have the ability that you could create alerts and notifications back to the customer as well as internally. So you get that internal and external communication. And then you could also have it then, monitor and see if dated events are not happening, and then raise alerts in the event that items have not been returned in an exchange situation. And again, also like the OMX experience that we talked about, create, in the event that we're not covering a scenario that you need, then you're able to add the user experience as well as the backend plumbing to make those returns as seamless as possible, because definitely that is becoming a rather big headache, and having that inventory just sitting idle out there in the world without fluid process to get them back is definitely a challenge, and definitely something that we work through with our customers.
And if I could add on to that one, Chad, I think I'm seeing some really interesting rumblings out in the market about how different brands and different technology partners are looking at returns. And I think the baseline for returns, unless you have a well-managed process and system to manage it, like that's the prerequisite, similar to what we were talking about with just inventory accuracy and capabilities there. That's the prerequisite for beginning to be able to optimize the experience there. But I'm seeing some really interesting experiences out in the market, including having one customer potentially deliver their return to another customer that's geographically near them who wants the inventory if it's disposition good. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if that's going to catch on or not, but it's really interesting. Another really interesting trend around returns that I'm seeing in the market that I think is probably going to get some traction is deep returns analytics that drive not just KPIs and how are we performing, but drive upfront decision making, enabling you to ask questions upfront, like, should I be promoting offers for items that a customer is likely to return on the back end? How are customers managing their bracketing strategies and all of those? And because I have the levers, like in a modern order management platform, to drive tailored experiences, tailored inventory strategies at different segments of customers, when we start to layer in those innovative analytics strategies and platforms on top of that, really the sky becomes the limit at that point, right? And we can optimize, we can increase sales, we can reduce stockouts, and who would think that returns as a tool to reduce stockouts and increase our available to sell inventory? I would tell you 5 to 10 years ago, that wasn't even in the discussion, right? So the discussions really are changing, and I do want to thank our partners at Fluent for doing so much to advance the capabilities in that area to allow us to have those levers to pull so I can be in those interesting discussions.
Great. I think we have time for probably 2 more questions. Jim, this one's probably good for you as well. Let's see, they say on cloud or on-prem, which is better for a company of my size? And they note that they do about 13,000 orders a month, multiple locations.
It's really fantastic question. I got that question a lot a few years ago, and now what I'm starting to see is I really start to invert that question on its head. Instead of people asking, can I move to the cloud? Is it good for me to be on the cloud? Is it time to be on the cloud? My question really is, do you need to be on premise, right? Is there some underlying reason to be on premise? If not, my default has shifted from before it was on premise, then it became you can do either or. Now I'm assuming that you're going to be on the cloud because there's so many great tools and capabilities that being on the cloud enables, right? You have access from anywhere. You have, effectively infinite scalability and burst capacity. You don't have to pay, and your vendors and SaaS providers don't have to pay for your peak capacity all the time. They only have to pay for your peak capacity at the time that it's running. And that allows you to get more effective and tailored pricing. It allows you to pay for only what you use, and use really what you're paying for better, right? So it's always available, and you're only paying for what you're using. So I think the question, to my point, has been inverted. I will say for a 13,000 order brand, that I don't see any challenges from that volume or anything that would prevent you from being on the cloud. And that would be my starting point for any discussion in that area.
Great. So this last question, it goes back to your KPI slide. Says, which one would you say is the most important one to keep an eye on?
I would say that there are two that if you combine them, they really add up to a good picture of how your dropship KPIs and how your dropship program is performing. To me, that's probably on-time delivery rates and your refund return rates, right? So effectively the question, were we able to get it to the customer on time, and how often did they return it, covers a lot of the other KPIs in it. Generally, I like leading indicators, and those are trailing indicators. But if you had to focus on one or two to say, how are we doing? That's a fantastic starting point that would drive me down a decision tree of figuring out what the other KPIs are that might be impacting those two.
Great. I think that's a great way to wrap up too. I just want to thank everyone for their interest and attention today. We'd love your feedback. We're going to offer you a short survey at the end of this. And I'd also like to reiterate our thanks to Jim and Chad for participating today, and say a special thank you to Pivotry and Fluent Commerce for making today's event possible. This concludes today's webinar. Have a wonderful day.